So today's story is a fascinating little tale that explains why you should never, ever insult a samurai or his lord. So, if you like samurai or Japanese history or Japanese folktales, please don't forget to like the video and don't forget to subscribe so you can stay on top of new videos as they come out, as we have a new Tales video every week. But with all of that out of the way, let's just get right into this story. Once upon a time, imawa mukashi, at the estate of the esteemed Minamoto no Yorimitsu, a man whom we saw several videos ago, there was a big party. He had invited many guests and everybody came to hang out, have a good time, and enjoy some drinks and possibly some music and some poetry or whatever nobility at the time enjoyed. And among the guests that came was Minamoto no Yorimitsu's younger brother, Minamoto no Yorinobu, whom we saw in just the previous video. And then perhaps most importantly, among Yorimitsu's retainers and underlings was a stalwart warrior by the name of Taira no Tadamichi. But he was in fact Yorimitsu's underling. He served Yorimitsu as a warrior. And on that day, as everybody was having a good time, this Tadamichi went out and got some extra drink. I guess maybe he was going to pour some for his friends or for some other friends, or maybe he just wanted a drink himself. I'm not entirely sure. But he came back bearing a container full of drink, and at this moment, Minamoto no Yorinobu, again the master of the house's younger brother, who was a famed, very skilled, very well-known warrior, called out to this Tadamichi in a very loud voice, so everybody could hear very clearly. And he said, "Tadamichi, in the province of Suruga, there is a man named such and such who has done me a disservice and slandered my name. He has insulted me and shamed me. Go get him, slay him, and bring me his head." Now this Tadamichi, he was a stalwart warrior. He was very capable. And so it's not surprising that Yorinobu decided that he was going to rely on him. However, without saying anything, the first thing that Tadamichi thought was, "I serve the Lord at this residence. And although this man is his younger brother and part of the same family, I have never served him and I owe him no actual allegiance. And also, while it's great that he thinks that I am so reliable as to turn to me in his hour of need, this is not the way you're supposed to handle these kinds of things. What he should have done is pulled me aside and quietly and discreetly explained the situation to me, give me all the information that I needed, and then send me on my way. I mean, what kind of a man shouts out in the middle of a party, 'Go kill this man that you've never met before and bring me his head'? It's ludicrous, I say. It's absolutely ridiculous." Now that's what he thought. But of course he didn't say this. I mean, this is ancient Japan. Like, nobody ever says what they actually think. So instead, Tadamichi did the most Japanese thing, and he kind of hummed and hawed about it and gave not a particularly concrete answer, just said whatever he needed to get Yorinobu off of his back, and then went about his day like normal. And now, fast forward 3 to 4 months or so. Tadamichi had given this command zero thought. Again, he thought it was silly and absurd, and he owed no allegiance to this younger brother of his lord. It was not a big deal, and so he wrote it off that day, just put it out of his mind and never thought about it again. And yet, on this day, he was given a task that required him to go out to the eastern provinces, because Yorimitsu's main house was in the capital, which was in the central part of Japan, in case you don't already know the layout and historically where things were. But for whatever reason the text doesn't say, Tadamichi was now heading out to the eastern country. And so coming up from the capital, he was on the road, just going along for a little bit, when wouldn't you know, he accidentally ran into the man that Yorinobu had commanded to slay and bring him his head. Now, the text does have a spot where the name is supposed to appear, but either because the text is really old or because it wasn't transcribed properly, we can't actually read what the characters say, and so we don't know what this man's name was. So I'm just going to call him Steve. So Tadamichi runs into Steve, and they're kind of hanging out together. Neither Tadamichi nor this man are on their horses. They're at a bit of a rest stop, I'm guessing, and they began talking, just kind of casually swapping stories, enjoying each other's company, you know, just something to pass the time while they refresh their horses, probably take care of all of the other callings of nature. And after spending some time together, Tadamichi was getting ready to leave again. And as he was just about to head off, this Steve guy, this unnamed man who, again, we don't know his name, called out to him and said, "So, are you not going to do what Yorinobu asked you to do?" And Tadamichi stopped for a second and gave him a funny look, like, "What are you talking about?" But then he remembered. And of course it made perfect sense, because Yorinobu had just blurted out this command to a bunch of people at a big party who were all warriors and connected. And so obviously it wasn't that hard to imagine that this story made it to this guy himself, and now he was worried that somebody was coming up from the capital, somebody with close ties to Yorinobu was going to come up from the capital and get at him. And so after being asked this question, Tadamichi simply kind of shrugged and said, "You know, I don't actually serve Yorinobu, I serve his elder brother Yorimitsu, so I really have no obligation to fulfill here. Plus, when Yorinobu told me this, he blurted it out in front of everybody, and it was totally improper and totally out of left field and a little bit ludicrous, so I thought it was silly and decided against it." Like, really, dude, it was really unusual. And then he gave a good-natured laugh just to kind of lighten the mood, just to show this guy that, you know, I have nothing against you, I'm not here to get you, I have other duties that I have to attend to, it's okay, please feel relaxed around me. And when this Steve heard what Tadamichi had to say, he breathed a huge sigh of relief, and he told him, "When I heard that somebody close to Yorinobu was actually coming up from the capital on command from his lord, I was really worried that you were going to come specifically to get me. And I've been waiting anxiously all day for this time to arrive, and now I'm so glad to hear that you actually find his request unreasonable. Seriously, I cannot thank you enough, I cannot tell you enough how happy I am, how relieved I am." And at this point, Tadamichi probably nodded, a good-natured, understanding nod, and was just about to leave again when all of a sudden this guy spoke once more. "But even if it was in your heart to listen to Yorinobu, to do as he said, and to come after me, well, my men and I, we are actually really, really strong. Like, really strong, bro. Like, you have no idea. And there's no way you could have actually gotten away with doing to us what you would. Not a chance." And then he also gave a good-natured laugh, a good, hearty, manly laugh. And at this point, Tadamichi almost couldn't believe what he had just heard. Here he was, showing this guy some mercy. Obviously, he could have just done what Yorinobu wanted, slayed this guy, took his head, and brought it to Yorinobu, and gotten all sorts of rewards and praises and whatever. But perhaps part of the reason why he didn't is that was a bit of a pain and more effort than it was worth, and also partly because, nobody likes going around just slaughtering people. But now, this guy had crossed the line. He had insulted Yorinobu at some point, doing who knows what. But more than that, he had now insulted Tadamichi himself, claiming that there was no way Tadamichi could take him. And Tadamichi couldn't stand that. And so the first thing he thought to himself was, bro, I should have just said that wasn't my intention and not worried about it and not engaged this idiot in conversation, because now we're in this big mess and I have to respond. And this dum-dum should have just said something to the effect of, "Well, sir, I'm very glad you don't think that you're not coming after me. I can live the rest of my days in relief." But no, he had to go say something stupid, and now I have to respond in the only way proper. What an absolute imbecile. Well then, since he has insulted me just in the same way he has Yorinobu, I'm going to fill him with arrows, take his head, and show it to Yorinobu, and get all the rewards that I am deserving of. Now again, that's what he thought, but that's not what he said. What he said was, "Okay," and then he took off. He just left the guy. And after going a certain way and losing sight of this Steve guy, Tadamichi then gathered his men together. He explained the situation to them, explained what had happened. He saddled up his horse properly. He got a quiver of arrows and a bow, possibly even a sword, maybe got geared up in some armor. And as soon as preparations were done, he took off after this guy, went straight for him. And he followed the guy close to the coastline. And the coastline kind of zigzagged in and out, and he could see the guy off in the distance, and he beelined it straight for him. Now, he didn't immediately attack him, because by the time he caught up to this guy, they had entered into a small grove of trees, and so Tadamichi waited for this guy to get out into an open field where he could maneuver his horse around a little bit better. And after getting into this field, Tadamichi rode up on his horse, and he shouted at this guy, "Yes, I am coming for you." And then he took off straight at this guy. And now this guy managed to turn his horse around to see what all the commotion was about. However, everything that Tadamichi had told him up to that point had put him off of his guard. And so he had no armor. He was on a leisurely horse, not a horse made for war or made for running or anything. And he had just been casually sauntering along without a care in the world. And so without getting his bow ready or even having the chance to fire a single shot in his defense, Tadamichi closed the gap and shot him dead center with an arrow, and this man tumbled backwards off of his horse and hit the dirt dead. Now, this man was not alone. He had some retainers. Apparently, he was a moderately high-ranking warrior of some kind. But as soon as all his retainers saw this, they of course started freaking out, and they started scattering every way. Now, Tadamichi also had some retainers who were ready for a fight, and they engaged these retainers. And some of them they shot dead, and other ones managed to escape, but one way or another, all of his retainers disappeared. And so Tadamichi then came up to this man's now lifeless body, took its head, and returned to the capital bearing this gruesome macabre trophy and presented it to Yorinobu. And Yorinobu was of course very, very pleased with this. Tadamichi had done exactly as he had wanted him, and as a reward, he then gave Tadamichi a horse with an extremely fine, well-crafted saddle. Now, after this whole incident, whenever Tadamichi ever talked to anybody about what happened, he simply said something to the effect of, you know, this whole thing should have gone differently. That man should technically still be alive now, but he had to go run his mouth and say one stupid thing, and because of that, I engaged him. However, it wasn't just me that he insulted, but the Lord of Kawachi, and sometimes I wonder how much of that man's death should be laid at my feet, and how much it was the machinations of Lord Yorinobu. And thus, it was said that whenever anybody heard Tadamichi say this, they grew intensely afraid of the Lord of Kawachi, Minamoto no Yorinobu, because the text seems to imply that this whole thing was a scheme by Yorinobu to get Tadamichi to go and slay this man that had insulted him. Perhaps he assumed that because this man had insulted me, he will also insult Tadamichi should he meet him. And perhaps Yorinobu knew that Tadamichi was going to be going along the road at some point and run into this guy. I don't know all the details, and the text doesn't seem to expound on them. However, it does imply that Yorinobu was a man that everybody should definitely be wary of. Okay? And that is the end of this story. So, if you enjoyed it, again, please give the video a like. Please subscribe to the channel so you can stay on top of the new stories as they come out every week. And if you had any interesting tidbits to add or you know more about this story, if I got anything wrong, please let me know in the comments. But with that, we're going to end it here. So I want to thank you very much if you've been watching all the way up to this point. Ito katejike no koso haberi kere. And hopefully, we will see you next week when we hear the story about a different warrior from a family that does not belong to either the famous Minamoto or the Taira clans, but rather a warrior of the Fujiwara house. Anyways, that'll be it for now, and I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.